right, welcome to the today's speech on U.S. half eagles, $5 gold pieces. And our speaker today is William Jones. He's a longtime collector, over 50 years collecting. He collects everything U.S., collects Roman, and what was the other thing you told me? British. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to William Jones.
Well, thank you all for coming. It's really encouraging to see so many people. I just remembered one thing I forgot, though. Sorry about that. Pointer. Today I'm going to talk about the U.S. $5 gold piece from the beginning until, well, sort of the end. And if you have any questions, because I'm up here to try and help you, I tried to pick out points that I thought would be interesting, but if there's something else you'd like me to attempt to answer, I'll be more than happy to make an effort to do that. Okay, we start out with where the $5 gold piece is in the total image of things. And here you see we had 350 million gold pieces minted by the United States government from 1795 to 1933. And the $5 gold piece comes in at 22.5% of that total. The 5 was a very, very popular piece in the 19th century, but the double eagle finally overtook it because the people who were making huge deals in gold wanted double eagles, and the mint started turning those out in huge quantities, especially in the 20th century. So it was for that reason that the double eagle went ahead of the $5 gold piece. It's interesting to note nearly half the coins that the government issued during that period were double eagles. But we're going to talk about fives because they were there from the beginning. Now we start off with an impossible requirement. Imagine if you were earning $1,200 or $1,400 a year and the government wanted $10,000 from you to put up a bond to do your job. Well, I don't think you could do it. And given this impossible situation, the only coins the mint produced in its first year and a half plus of existence were made of copper. So that was the reason why you see nothing but copper coins for all of 1793 and for a good part of 1794. Now, Thomas Jefferson, who was Secretary of the State, had responsibility for the U.S. Mint, and he lobbied Congress and got them to lower the bonds, and then he went to various wealthy individuals and had them put up the money so that the chief coiner and the treasurer were able to do their jobs and therefore handle gold and silver. The first silver pieces were the silver dollar in October of 1794, followed by the half dollar, and finally the half dime. And although they're dated 1794, they were really issued in 1795 to start. Now, here was the big problem at the first mint. This was the roller that they put the strips through in order to get the ingots down to the thickness of the finished coins. And this thing was constantly breaking down. And so Congress was really putting pressure on the mint. Get gold and silver out there. You need to do that. So the mint said, okay, we're not going to make any copper coins for the first 9 months of 1795. We'll make nothing but gold and silver. And finally, they got around to making the gold coins. The first ones were issued at the end of August, and they look like this. And they're wonderful pieces. Collectors dream of having these, but I can't sugarcoat this in any way. They are just incredibly expensive. And there's a good reason why they're incredibly expensive, because there aren't very many of them, and a lot of people would like to have them. For example, a 1916 Standing Liberty quarter, which is a really big coin to a lot of people, is far more common than this 1795 $5 gold piece. So the bad news is, if you want to own one of these in what my sweet spot is AU, it's going to run you anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000 to land one of these coins. There's just no other way to Just no other way to put it. Now, one of the problems that critics had with the first mint coins was that they didn't like the eagles that were on the back of the pieces. Called them turkey buzzards, called them sick turkeys, called them whatever. Collectors absolutely love these coins, but the people back in the day did not. So the solution was to use a part of the national seal, which if you have a dollar in your hand, you pull it out and you look at the reverse, you'll see the eagle there in the pyramid. That is the national emblem. It has two sides. It was devised in, I think, 1782 during the early Soviet Confederation. So they used that, and then it was used as the reverse of the gold coins and also the silver coins, and guess what? The critics were happy. Now this 1806 $5 gold piece is quite a bit more common than the first one I showed you. As a matter of fact, I think this might be the most common early gold piece there is. That's the good news, but the bad news is it's going to cost $10,000 to $20,000 to get one that's really pretty nice. And I just put this up there for academic purposes for most of us. This was an indicator of how the early mint operated. They had a 1795 die sitting around, which was okay, and they had new dies sitting around, which had the large eagle on it. So they call this emergency coinage. So they made these coins with one side with 1795, the other side with the heraldic eagle, and these were probably made in 1798. But these will cost you more than the first coin I showed you if you'd really like to have one. So that's just kind of an academic exercise. Now in 1804, there were huge concerns, well actually before that, of the flow of precious metal, gold and silver, out of the United States. And so finally, the powers that be decided, well, we need to suspend production of the silver dollar and of the $10 gold piece, because those seem to be the pieces that are really facilitating the flow of precious metal out of the country. So, in that year, now there are $1804, but none of those were made in 1804. So the pieces that came out in 1804 were dated 1803. There are 1804 $10 gold pieces. It's a key date and it's very difficult to get. But at any rate, those are the two flagship coins of the United States monetary system, and the U.S. wouldn't make any more of them for over 30 years, which was pretty remarkable. And then, to top things off, in 1808, after 1808, they stopped making quarter eagles. So the only gold coin that the United States Mint was issuing was the $5 gold piece. That was it. Now, we have a new fellow hired in named John Reich. And they hired him in because the original engraver, a fellow named Scott, Robert Scott, was getting old, and people were figuring that maybe we need to have someone else come in and, help him out. So Scott took on the responsibility of redesigning every US coin, and that of course included the $5 gold piece. Now the people who collect cat-bust halves noticed something very unusual. On the 13th star of every one of Scott's dies, he cut a little notch into it. And if you look very, very carefully, you'll see that he was cutting notches into the $5 gold piece dies as well. So this is a little pickup. Now, it's possible to collect these coins by die variety, okay? And there's a book by John Danruther and by Harry Bass, which you can get. And if you are you've got to be a bit more than a multi-millionaire to be able to collect this stuff by die variety. But at any rate, it is possible. This incidentally might be the most common type period to get. So maybe you could get into one for under 10,000, possibly. But they are available. And all this stuff, I would say, definitely buy certified unless you're an expert and know everything about these, because there are frauds out there for just about anything. Now, in 1813, Reich decided to change his design. And once more, we've got the notch in the star. He was putting his little signature. Probably nobody knew he was doing this stuff or were looking at it. But we had this piece, which had this rather hefty lady on the obverse. And the thing about 1813 $5 gold pieces is that those of us who collect type coins say, thank goodness that coin was made. Because, as we shall see after this, it gets very, very difficult to collect this particular design for reasons that I will explain subsequently. As a matter of fact, almost half of the cap bust, large diameter $5 gold pieces there are 1813s. So if you're a type collector, chances are this is what you get. They tell you going in that maybe you'll get an 1818. I've never run into very many of them. 1813 seems to be the date. Now we get into what I call sleeper rarities. And the most famous of all is the 1822 with 3 known, and 2 of them are in the Smithsonian. This coin has sold for $8.4 million. But it's only one of a number of rarities through this year. And you'll see just running down the list, estimated number of survivors. 18, 15, 13, 19, 24 pieces, 16 pieces, 7 pieces. Why are they so rare? Well, it's not because of the mintage, because the mintages were actually fairly decent. The problem was these things were getting on boats and heading to Europe and going into melting pots, and they were virtually all destroyed. So you had entire mintages which just disappeared. So that's why they're so difficult to get. And believe me, there's very few people who are collecting these. You just can't do it. So we move on. This is the reduced diameter piece. And if you're a type collector, one of the things is reduced size quarter or reduced size dime or a reduced size $half, the reeded edge $half eventually. They came later. But with this, this was the very last of the early gold types, as far as I'm concerned. Now the gray sheet says the next type is early gold, but I don't really go with that. But these are even tougher to get than the previous type because the melting pots were continuing to churn. They were melting them like crazy. And for a lot of these years, there's fewer than 100 pieces known. So it's very, very difficult to get these coins. Now you might wonder, why was all this melting going on? Well, as they say about boxers, it's the tail of the tape. And in an early US $5 gold piece, there was 2/28 of an ounce, 0.28 ounce in one of those. But in a similar British coin, which is called the guinea, there was 0.25 ounces. So that little difference there accounted for, melt them down. Plus you have to remember, this is the United States of America in the 1820s. It was not a highly regarded nation. Great Britain was up and rising and their coins had a lot of respect. Ours didn't have that much respect, and therefore they'd rather have them in this form than in that form. And then it got much worse in 1817 because the British had a much needed reform of their coinage where they reduced the weight of everything so that it would circulate, because the British coins prior to this, the silver and gold ones, especially the silver ones, were just too heavy and they didn't circulate, because it would be like today, you go out, would you spend a 1964 dime? No. Or a quarter? No, because it melts for far more than its face value. So the difference here really got to be big, and that's why I think the US coins in the 1820s and early 30s ended up going to the melting pot, because, well, people would take one of these. And believe it or not, the British sovereign still weighs the same amount today as what they changed it to in 1817. And the same thing actually applies to our gold coins. Although there was a little adjustment in 1837 for getting it to 900 fine status, but that was minor stuff. At any rate, we go to Mr. Andrew Jackson. Now, Jackson was a little like Donald Trump. He was a very controversial figure. A lot of people didn't like him. He was very frank. If he didn't like you, he let you know it, that he didn't like you. And Jackson had his theories. And one of the theories was that things would be best for yeoman farmers and for wage earners if they got on gold and got away from paper money. And frankly, during Jackson's years, that wasn't the worst advice because the banking industry was not very well regulated. Banks were issuing notes that went poof very, very quickly. Some banks were good, not all were bad, but there were bad ones out there. So if you really wanted money that was worth something, you wanted gold. And Jackson in his youth had been burned by one of these paper transactions. So that was what made him so questioning of using paper money. So what Jackson did and his allies in the House and the Senate supported was a reduction in the weight of the US $5 gold pieces. And the indication of that was that they did away with E pluribus unum above the eagle's head there. And there was thought in 1834, well, maybe we should date these August 1834. They didn't do that, but at any rate, that's why that particular month is a cutoff, because that's when the classic head $5 gold pieces came into circulation. And this is also the first instance where most collectors are able to afford to start collecting the coins. These aren't nearly as expensive as the previous pieces I've been showing you. Now, just to give you a look at how these operate, this one is a PCGS MS61. And it's got some little bit of rub in the field, but it is an extremely impressive coin when you see it because it almost has a proof-like look to it. These coins are extremely rare in unk, real unk. I'm talking, real honest to goodness unk, no question. They're fairly common in VF and EF. They're common enough that you can collect them if you would like to. AUs are a little tougher, but you can do it. And also the survival rate's much better. 1.2% is a whole lot better than 1/10 of 1% or 2/10 of 1%. So there's a chance of owning these if you like. Now, if you collect hard times tokens, they actually got mentioned. Here they are. This is Webster, and these were anti-Jackson people who issued these, incidentally. Here's Webster, and the ship's on, and it's floating nicely on the water. And credit current means paper currency. The reverse is Van Buren, who was Jackson's successor, and it's shipwrecked and it's saying metallic currency, and it's spelled in various ways depending which token it is. Another one down here makes fun of another Jackson group of supporters called the Loco Focos. On the back it says mint drop and Benton's experiment. That's for Thomas Hart Benton, who was a senator who supported Jackson to the hilt and proposed the bill which got the reduced size gold coins into circulation. Now, the next part of the Jackson program was to expand the U.S. mint system. And this involved opening mints in Dahlonega, Georgia, and Charlotte, North Carolina. The reason why they were located there was because the very first gold rush in the United States was in the South. It wasn't in California. And the unfortunate part was that the gold production there hit its peak in the late 1820s and then proceeded to go down from there. And for that reason, these mints never produced the number of coins that were anticipated that they would be produced. Now, one more Jacksonian feature of these mints was that he gave them presses which were only capable of striking $5 gold pieces or smaller. They couldn't strike $10 gold pieces at the Charlotte and Dahlonega Mint because the presses were too small, and that was purposely done. Most people, when they deposited their gold at these two mints, wanted $5 gold pieces, so most of the coins that these mints made were $5 gold pieces. You can get 2.5s and $1 pieces, and there's a Dahlonega $3 gold piece, which is another one of those $50,000 or $100,000 items, which you don't see very often. The other mint was, wrong thingy. The New Orleans Mint, which opened pretty much at the same time. They had growing pains there, though, because they sent mint officials down there, and they were not accustomed to the diseases you could catch down there, and a couple of them caught those diseases and died. The building had structural problems, and so in 1839, the the only thing they made was $2.50 gold pieces. Finally, in the 1840s, they started to make $5 and $10 and some $2.50 and $1 gold pieces, and some New Orleans mint 20s eventually when that came online. Now we have a change in design. Christian Goldbrecht, who is most famous for the Goldbrecht dollars, also designed the Liberty head $5 gold pieces, and Goldbrecht's original concept looked like this. Later on, Miss Liberty and the Eagle became more substantial and looked like this. Now this is when the coins start to get much more common and much more collectible. And as we go on and head up into more and more time, this is where the current price of gold at almost $4,500 an ounce has basically sucked the numismatic value out of many of these coins. If you look at the prices on the gray sheet these days, you'll see that the price of an EF40 is about the same as it is for an MS63 for a common date. And well, you can buy them that way. Obviously, you're not going to buy an EF40 if you can get an MS63 for the same money. So the only thing I caution you about is how sure are you of $4,500 gold? It's amazed me. I can't stand up here and tell you what it's doing. I understand the central banks are buying it like nobody's business, which shows probably a negative attitude toward the US dollar, but that's the way it is. We just have to accept what happens to us. San Francisco Mint. This opened coincidentally with the discovery of gold in California. And the first San Francisco Mint was a building that was bought from a company, a private concern, Moffett and Company. This 1855 is kind of interesting. Believe it or not, the state of California had in its original constitution a law which forbid banks from issuing circulating paper money. So there was no circulating paper money in California. Everybody used silver and gold, and that included coins, tokens, gold dust, pinching, any way that you could use gold was what was used. So coins like this 1855 and the ones from the 1860s, it's virtually impossible to get these in mint state. The AUs are what you drive for, and you will pay a pretty penny for one of them. But they're all well circulated. Now, there was a second San Francisco Mint building called the Granite Lady, and this one is an 1886 S, and that sounds rather exotic, except it isn't because it's a common date. So it's one of those pieces that you will see will be priced at $1,000-something on the gray sheet in EF40, and you go all the way to MS63, and it's still $1,000-something, maybe another $20 for the 63. So it just, this just amazes me how it works. And finally, we had the addition of the motto, "In God We Trust," which was during the Civil War. People were horrified by what was happening, all the family members who were killed and the casualties and the horrors of the war. And finally, the motto, "In God We Trust," originally appeared on the 2-cent piece. And then in 1866, the government made the decision to add the motto to any coin which was large enough to somehow accommodate it. And it so happened that the $5 gold piece was just large enough to have the motto, "In God We Trust," added to the design. The $2.50 gold pieces were too small, and so therefore the type didn't change. Now we go to the next mint, Carson City, which opened in 1870. Once more, it was close to where precious metals were being mined out of the ground, and therefore the government deemed it desirable to have a mint in that particular area. Now, if you'd like a Carson City $5 gold piece, I will advise you to go look at ones from the 1890s. There are ones from the 1870s, but once more, you have to have very deep pockets to be able to afford them. The ones from the 1890s are much more collector friendly with respect to price. And finally, the Denver Mint. Denver operated for a long, long time, and they even called it a mint, but it didn't make any coins. It was an assay office. All it did was take bullion from people who brought it in. They would form it into bars, and they were called unparted bars because they weren't up to the coinage standard. They would send those bars to either Philadelphia or New Orleans, and they'd be turned into coins there. Finally, in 1906, Denver opened as a full-fledged mint and started to issue coins. So if you're looking for a 1906 or a 1907 Denver Mint $5 gold piece, they're easy to get. It's one of the real common dates. It's one of those dates that has had its numismatic value totally squished by the price of gold, so it's easy to get. Which leads us to this little collection. And I actually noticed there's one that's out among the exhibits out there of this. This is the $5 gold piece is the only denomination in which all 7 of the U.S. mints that the U.S. government operated issued a $5 gold piece. That's the only one. No other denomination has it from all 7 mints. And this is a fun collection to put together. I've done it a couple of times and kind of improved the grade the second time around. The real killers are the Charlotte and Dahlonega. They're the ones that are going to cause you the most trouble. New Orleans and Carson City are kind of tough. Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Denver are all pretty easy. So if this is some sort of a collection you'd like to put together, it's easy enough to do. Now we move on to St. Gaudens with the $10 and $20 gold pieces, and most collectors are very familiar with the $10 Indian and the St. Gaudens $20 gold piece. They're less familiar with what the mint was thinking about doing for the 2.5 and the $5 gold piece. And the original thought was, well, we'll make miniatures of the Standing Liberty here for those 2 coins. And amazingly, they were thinking about putting edge lettering around them, which, especially a coin as thin as a $2.5 gold piece, how you would put the edge lettering on that is beyond me, but they were thinking about it. But before that ever came into being, 2 fellows stepped in, especially this fellow, William Sturgis Bigelow. He was a member of Boston's upper class. He was a medical doctor, but I don't think practiced very much. He had loads and loads of money, and he really took a huge interest in art, especially Asian art. And he came up with the idea of producing a coin intaglio, like the ancient Egyptians had. And what that means is that all of the devices here are below the level of the stone that surrounds them. So these are all like engraved into the surface, and the main surface is on the top. So this was the result. Now, Mr. Bigelow really knew Theodore Roosevelt, and he knew how to press the right buttons on Theodore Roosevelt. He and Theodore were good friends. As a matter of fact, when Theodore came to Boston, he used to stay at Mr. Bigelow's house. So Mr. Bigelow knew that if I put an Indian on this, Teddy's going to like it. And the other, with the eagle, it was very similar to the eagles that had appeared on the other 2 pieces. Now, the one on the far left there, that was from the 1905 Teddy Roosevelt inaugural medal, which Augustus St. Gaudens designed. And before you want to run out and buy one of those, I'll warn you right now, the mintage was 125. So Augustus St. Gaudens and also Adolph Wyman produced this particular piece, and then it was the inspiration for the eagles that appeared on the gold pieces after that. So that is if you collect inaugural medals, that's like an inaugural medal treasure. Collectors dream of having that one. So we move ahead. Now, one of the thoughts on intaglio is that, gee, these coins will wear forever because all the devices are below the surface. So it would be really, really cool. They'll just never get worn. And you really have to look at, I looked up these two on PCGS Coin Facts just to find low-grade ones, because low-grade ones are rare, okay? Tell you right now, very difficult to find. And this one that they called a good 4, it almost looks like the Indian has some mint luster still left on his nose there. Now, all of this is very, very nice, but the trouble is, the part of the coin that takes the most wear and hits are the field. And so when the government started issuing these coins, they got to be ugly in circulation pretty fast, because the very first thing that got hit and the very first thing that got wear was the fields. And that just didn't look particularly good. And if you ever work on a gold typeset, the 8-piece gold typeset, or the 12-piece gold typeset. Now, everybody knows the $3 gold piece is a bear, and everybody knows that the Type 2 gold dollar is a bear. I'll tell you the third bear if you're looking for uncirculated, and that's this $5 Indian. It is really difficult to find $5 Indians that are really, really nice, and I'm talking 64 or better. Okay, they're really, really tough. The previous designs had these rims which protected things. Also, another problem was the dies had to be absolutely pristine, because when people counted these coins, they put them in nice little stacks. Well, if the dies were warped somehow, the stack went like that. Another problem was that people, when they were counting these coins, would go like that. Oh, that feels like 5 pieces. Well, the Indians were slightly thinner than the earlier pieces, so that kind of messed that up. And then finally, there was a totally funny thing where people said, these coins are going to cause a pandemic because there's going to be all kinds of dirt that's going to be in all those little crevices and stuff, and everybody's going to get sick. Well, that just proved to be foolishness. But the rest of it was true enough, and the $5 Indians were not all that popular, actually, with people who really had to use gold. I'm reminded of the very first job I had in corporate America. There was a fellow that had been there for 50 years. And he told me one day they called all the young accountants in, and he walked into the room and they had this stack of $2.50 gold pieces. And they told him and his friends to count these pieces because somebody had paid for some chemicals with this big, huge stack of $2.50 gold pieces. Could you imagine being a coin collector and looking at those things? Truly amazing. So now we get to World War I. And during World War I, the US government suspended all coinage of gold. Everything was stopped. And the last of the Indian $5 golds was a 1916 S during that period. Then when the war was over, in 1920, the US government started issuing gold coins again. They issued $2.50 gold pieces because there was a demand for those. My mother told me that she used to get $2.50 gold pieces as a Christmas present. And indeed, that was how gold used to flow. People would come in and try to get $2.50 gold pieces during Christmas to give them out. And then the rest of the year, they'd flow right back to the banks again. But the government did go and make them from 25 to 29. They didn't make any $5 gold pieces. They made a limited number of $20 gold pieces. But if you look at the Red Book, it's every year in the 20s, there are $20 gold pieces that were made because that was what people really wanted. Now, they finally did resume the half eagle in 1929. And it seems they weren't very popular. The mintage was 662,000, which should have made it a fairly common date. But the trouble was, nobody wanted them. They sat in the government vaults. And then in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt had his gold surrender order, there they sat in the vaults, and there they went to the melting pot. So somebody's figured out that there's 783 examples. Don't ask me how they figured out that number, but that's what they say there is. And so this is the key date. You'll pay a good price if you have a chance to buy one of these. From what I understand, they are mostly in low-end uncirculated condition. Finding a real gem is really, really hard, but that's true of any $5 Indian. I don't care how common the date is. But this ended what was called the old gold. Now, they promised you I was going to talk about counterfeits, and that could be a whole nother subject. I can't do that in this time that I've got here. But here's an example. The US government coins are sharp. They aren't fuzzy like this thing. They're sharp. That's just one of the indicators. If they're fuzzy like this thing, then there's a problem. Same thing goes back here. You know, fuzzy, fields not well defined, what they used to call fatty letters. There's a whole lot more to counterfeit detection than that, but I can't do any more at this particular time than just warn you that that's one of the problems. And if you really are concerned, you really need to buy certified, and don't buy Jack Blow's grading service who doesn't know squat about what they're doing. Deal with the guys that have a good reputation. And that's not only the top two. The others, Annex and ICG, can do fine as far as detecting counterfeits. So I just leave that out there for you. It's a concern, and it's been a concern, counterfeits. Back when I was a kid collector in the 1960s, the bad stuff came from Lebanon. And it was really made of gold. Trouble was, it wasn't real. And that's one thing that's really disappointing if you're a collector. You think, gee, this is old, this is 100 years old, and then you find out it was made last week in Lebanon, and it's like, you know, that really kills it. So, now I'm going to go off the block a little bit. In 1954, the United States stopped issuing commemorative coins because there had been a lot of abuses on them, a lot of fooling around with the way they were distributed. A lot of years it made absolutely no sense to make them. Like the Oregon Trail's an absolutely gorgeous coin, but why did they make it till 1939? Made no sense. So Congress said enough and ended what we call the old commemorative system. And in 1982, they kind of broke the ice with the George Washington commemorative $50. And then in 1984, they really broke the ice with the first United States gold coin that had been issued since 1933. And these were extremely popular. Everybody wanted one back in 1984. I can tell you I had to jump through hoops. The Mint lost my order and everything. I had to fight with them over the phone to try to convince them that I'd paid good money, and finally I got my coin. But at any rate, $5 gold pieces came in though with this, the Statue of Liberty set. And since this time, just about every commemorative gold coin has been a $5 gold piece. So to your 7-piece gold type set, you can add an 8th, the West Point Mint. So you can add West Point to the list. A lot of collectors don't like that, don't do that, but if you want to, go ahead. These things are worth melt now, unfortunately, most of them. And I can remember a time when this set down here sold for $850 and gold was selling for probably $250 or something, okay? Now they're back up to over $850, but it's not because collectors are chasing after them, it's because they melt. So, and these are really pretty. I don't know how many are being destroyed. Some of the designs are really nice, but just about all of them now are bullion, that's it. And I close with the Pretender. This is a $5 gold piece. It's the 10th ounce American gold eagle coin. It says it's $5. That's there because it gets special sales tax treatment. Collectors also like coins, things that say they have a face value. They don't like disc of metal. So therefore, this gets assigned $5. It now melts for $450. So the $5 is kind of a joke, but I called it the Pretender. And if you want a Pretender, you can get it. They used to be a lot less money, but at any rate, that's what I have to say formally. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to pick them up. Yeah.
If you want to put a set together of Indian head half eagles, what would you recommend how to do that?
Buy certified to start with,
Okay.
and have awfully deep pockets, because there's a couple of dates there that are very expensive. The better set to do is the 2.5s, because the 2.5s, there's only one date unless you got to have it in MS66. The 11D is going to cost you big money, but you can do the 2.5s for used to be reasonable money. When I was doing it in the 1980s, I had a goal of buying every coin except, well, the average, every coin except the 11D and really nice AU to say $200 a coin. That you can do, but you know, with gold the way it is, it drives up everything. So I would say the 2.5 is doable. The 5 is a major challenge, especially when you get a 29 that you got to pay a 5-figure price for. And a couple others are going to run you that too. So.
What about the, I guess a type set as far as just from the individual mints?
Oh, the mint type set? Yeah. It's probably going to take maybe 20,000, something less. You're going to have to pay 4,000 or 5,000 probably for a nice Dahlonega or Charlotte. Mm-hmm. Those are going to run you. New Orleans you can do cheaper. I did it more expensive and did one of the 1840s just because I felt like it. And then you got 3 bullion coins sitting there unless you're going to buy, you know, some outrageous grade. So,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Some of the bits you mentioned, the gold was deposited from ore that was mined locally. From New Orleans and Philadelphia, what form of deposit?
New Orleans was, the New Orleans Mint was opened to change foreign coins that came there into U.S. coins. That was the primary idea of it. No, there wasn't a New Orleans mine sitting there for it. Philadelphia, you know, always was the central office, and that's where the gold tended to flow. New York City thought they should have a mint too, but it never happened. But Philadelphia was located in the financial center of the country, really, so that was why that made sense. So New York might have made more sense, but Philadelphia was the first capital, and the first mint was opened at the Capitol, and there was legislation finally that kept it from being moved to Washington, D.C. They finally decided, no, we'll keep it in Philadelphia. Any others? Well, it looks like I got done on time, which is good, because I was concerned I had 30-some slides.